Welcome to Pathways to Greatness, the show where faith meets focus and potential becomes purpose. I'm your host, Jeff Forrester, mental performance coach, speaker, and believer that greatness begins within. Each episode, we'll uncover the biblical principles, mindset strategies, and daily disciplines that help student athletes, parents, and leaders just like you walk boldly in their calling. Let's step onto the path that leads to true greatness, God's way. Hey, welcome back to Pathways to Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Forrester, and on today's episode, I have the great Charlie Benton, the managing editor of Field Ethos, and I'm very excited about this conversation. And it didn't disappoint. It was the conversation that I had hoped we would have, and he's a great guy, and I just haven't gotten to know him because our paths have crossed. We've been in the same rooms, but it's been chaos because work is involved. And so I really, after listening to several of the podcast episodes that he's been on with other people, I just knew I had to have a conversation with him. And it was really good. We talked about everything. And the theme that I was going into it for, and I feel like you'll be able to pick up on this, is life pivots. So many times we have things in life that we need to pivot from, whether we know we need to or we have to. The other thing that Charlie talks about is how to pray. And I'm not going to tell you what he says and how he's changed his prayer, but it's something that I've done as well. And it's really scary, but absolutely miraculous. So this is going to be a great one. I know that you're going to enjoy it. So ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Benton.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, here we are. The countdown just got through. So welcome, everyone. This is Charlie Benton, and I'm really excited about this one. We've been trying to get this one together for a little while, and it finally landed in my lap, and so I'm happy. So Charlie, welcome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, there's several. You can go to Charlie's feed on Instagram, and he has all the different podcasts that he was on. They're all fantastic. I'm hoping to take a little bit of a different spin to get your wisdom. But before we start all of that, I like to play a game called Would You Rather. It might be different than what you would normally play in the office, but Would You Rather, just to get everything warmed up. You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So would you rather make a tough decision that anyone or everyone questions, or avoid conflict to keep everyone happy?
Yeah. See, all right. Well, right off the bat, we're going to get into my overly analytical brain.
I love it. That's why I ask these questions.
when I first started trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do with my life, I thought that I was going to get into clinical counseling, family and marriage therapy, right? And the reason I wanted to do that was because since I was a kid, I've had this quirk in my personality, gift, if you want to call it that, I guess, where people feel really comfortable talking to me about all kinds of stuff. And I think one of the reasons for that is that I have a tendency to be able to see both sides of the situation. Implying, I guess, that there are only two sides. Maybe there's more than that, but I've got a pretty good ability to do that. And so to get back to what your question is, would I rather have, I don't know. I don't know that I could pick one way or the other. I mean, there's a part of me that certainly enjoys avoiding conflict, but I also really enjoy throwing something out there that maybe is a bit questionable, because I think that generates better discussion and causes people to grow a good bit. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to say I'd rather make a call that gets called into question by everybody else, and then we have to have a good discussion about it.
Do you feel as if, and I know this is a closed-ended question, which isn't great for podcasts, but do you feel like that has changed the older you've gotten?
When you say that, you mean what are you
the decision, like your answer? Would you say your answer has changed where you're picking the decision? So. Okay.
Yeah, I think I went through all the natural stuff that most teenage kids go through, where you're dealing with self-consciousness and trying to figure out if you accept yourself, if other people accept you, all that good stuff. And the older you get, hopefully, the more sure of yourself and more confident you are in making your decisions and being able to back them up. So yeah, I think I feel pretty good about that. I have prided myself on making some pretty difficult decisions over the years and been able to defend them. And maybe I overthink it a bit. I think I definitely do. But that overthinking allows me to feel more prepared to have conversations about why I chose what I chose. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Okay, number two. Would you rather be the most talented or the most resilient?
Hmm. That's a fantastic question. Um, Talent's great, but talent doesn't mean that you're not going to fail. And I think being able to bounce back from failure is probably more important than having the initial talent. So I'd go with resilience.
Yeah. And for me, that answer has changed as I've gotten older because I
Okay.
realize the value of resiliency, like you said, is that you're going to fail. I fail multiple times a day. And if I just allow that to, if I just stuck to my talent, I wouldn't be doing much of anything, Charlie.
Sure.
you know,
Yeah, no, I wouldn't either.
I look at him like going, what in the world? I watch, like Wiley's film and your photography and all these things. I'm like, good grief, I can make a pivot table. And that's about all I could do on a spreadsheet. And you sit there and you realize that if you just put everything into your talent, if anything happens and that goes away, look at professional athletes when they get injured,
Sure.
they're toast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, anybody that's, if I was a police officer, a detective for a number of years, and there were people on the force that was their entire life, man. And, there are some pretty scary statistics that follow cops once they get out of law enforcement and how soon after that they die, if that's all that they had going on in their lives. So, um, I can't say that I'm overly talented at that many things, but I'm certainly willing to give a lot of stuff a try. And God has blessed me with a ridiculous number of opportunities to do stuff that I was completely unqualified for. Um, but my dad always encouraged me to get out there and just pursue everything that remotely interested me. And that was some of the best advice I ever got. Because of that, I've had the opportunity and taken that opportunity to do a number of things that are pretty incredible.
Awesome. Because I want to, we'll put a pin in that to be cheesy because I want to come back to that later. And then this next question goes exactly what you were saying is would you rather feel called or qualified?
Sure. Yeah. I'd rather feel called all day. If you wait until you feel qualified, you're never going to do anything.
Yep. I totally agree. All right. The last one may be the most controversial. So, or if you're ready. So, would you rather have pizza or tacos?
Mm. Well, seeing as how my wife and I have gone on 2 dates this week because our kids are out of town, and both of those have been to the exact same Mexican restaurant for quesadilla tacos, I'm going with tacos.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the fact that you thought about it a little bit is not as common. Most people, it's like pizza, they'd answer right away or
Yeah.
tacos. So, and then I'm happy that you even told us what you order. So that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Quesadilla tacos with some really good consomme is fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and stand up because I notice I keep adjusting in my chair because I can't
You're
ever
good.
sit still. So we're going to do that and hope
Yeah.
for the best.
Well, the good thing is I rock back and forth. So I look like that I have issues
We'll balance
anyways.
each other out. I'll be moving back and forth this way and then go forward and back, and it'll be great.
Sure. Yep. Well, Charlie, I started Pathways to Greatness now, goodness, about 3+ years ago. And I did it for the idea of one, I just wanted to have good conversations with people like yourself. One, to find out what is your definition of greatness, because everybody's is different. Two, to prove to everyone no one has a linear path from A to B. It's not a straight line as they pursue that there's ups and downs, twists and turns. And ultimately, like we talked about in one of the questions earlier, I just want people to be resilient and not quit. There's so many times in life you're pursuing something and you just feel like I'm over my skis. I'm just going to call it. And you're just that much closer to where you're going to have that breakthrough.
Sure.
So, with all that being said, what would you say your definition of greatness is?
Man. So we play a bunch of different roles as people, and it's up to us to prioritize those different roles. And I think that first and foremost, being a Christian, my greatest role is my representation of Christ. It's my relationship with God and how I pursue that. And then after that relationship, it's my relationship with my wife, and then it's my relationship with my children, and then everything else is outside of that. And I think at this stage of my life, what I consider, because like you said earlier, different stage of your life, you'd have different answers for these questions. But at this stage of my life, I think the answer to that question, what is greatness? If I'm looking at the roles that I'm in right now, my greatest, like the definition of greatness would be to know that my children have a relationship with God, that they are Christians, that they've accepted Jesus, and that is the path that they are choosing to walk. So that's first and foremost my definition of greatness at this point in my life.
Yeah, and it is the most important. So whatever anybody else thinks is I'm in 100% agreement with you is that's the legacy that we leave behind, is that they know later in life what that means and what Christ meant to you and how you wanted to reflect that, because more things are caught than taught. And you can teach it, but how you show up every day, how you show up to love your wife, love them, they'll never forget that stuff.
Right. So if I were to pull back from that a little bit, I would say that greatness it kind of goes back to the word that you threw out there earlier, resilience. You're going to fail. You're going to screw up, whether it's in your relationship with God or in your relationship with your spouse and your relationship with your coworkers. You're going to fail, and you're going to fail over and over and over again. And it's trying to reduce maybe the number of failures, certainly the severity of them. And then just in crafting a life for yourself that is in service to other people, to not focus on the self, because that's what we're all programmed to do naturally, I think, is be self-serving, and to break away from that and to recognize that true happiness and joy comes in serving other people. Obviously, you have to make a living. You have to be able to support yourself and support your family, but we could do with a lot less in service of other people, I think. And I'm saying that as somebody that absolutely does not live by that every day, but it's something that I do give a lot of thought to, especially now.
Yeah, and I like the way you said that is just crafting a life to serve others, meaning that you can't make it. You're just constantly working on it. It's the everything changes because it's so liquid and fluid that it's going to change every day. And how you serve somebody today is not how they need to be served tomorrow.
Sure.
And because you don't know where they're at and their walk of life and the challenges that they face. So I'm curious, is when you started thinking about what does crafting look like, what are some of the things that you took into account for yourself to see, okay, what is crafting? How do I even start crafting a life like that?
Well, it's definitely a work in progress. I don't have some fantastic answers, but I think that, people are pretty good about revealing what it is that they need, whether they say it openly or they're just sort of suggesting it, if you're paying attention. And it's small things too. It's not like you have to be some multimillionaire and start a foundation and give away all this money. I mean, I'm talking about on a very, very basic level, right? So the way that you treat other people, like when you go into the 7-Eleven to buy something, and the way that you treat the clerk behind the counter, the person that's coming in after you, holding the door for them, having a nice word to say. But we've become a society that's so fixated on screens in front of our faces and just being walled off from other people that I think if you take the time to actually talk to those people around you, interact with them with a level of warmth, even a small act like that is serving the greater good. And it'll make you feel better. And so maybe in that regard, yes, the whole dilemma is like, well, are you actually doing it for other people, or are you trying to get a nice warm feeling for yourself? And I would say that if God's commanding us to be kind to one another, then that's probably what we need to do. And yes, a byproduct is that you feel better. But if your motivation is genuinely to take some sort of goodness out into the world to people around you, then I think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I'm glad the way you said that, in the sense of starting small. Is I do see, because I get wrapped up in trying to make things overly complicated, especially when you're thinking about crafting. It's because I'm big on writing goals down and creating tactics and strategies and all those things. But then there's times where I get paralyzed with all of that stuff, when it's like you said, is just being nice to somebody in the store and not expecting anything in return.
Correct.
And I'm glad that you brought that up as well, is that yes, you feel good when you do something, but you should do it whether you feel good about it or not. And then when you do it, then you do feel good. So
Right.
But you can't expect that reciprocal. And that's the world that we live in. It's, if I can do this for you, then what do I get in return? And it's, you got to look at what is the reason of doing that. It's like our conversation today is, I just want to get to know you better. And it just creates a cool environment to be able to have a conversation with you, that we're in different cities and we have different work schedules and we just don't cross paths that much. And so for me, reaching out was solely just to get to know you better. And that's, if we can do that in life, of just knowing our neighbor is important. I was telling my brother, we have some people that just moved out and they put their house up for sale. We've been in the neighborhood for 15 years. I have no idea who they are. Like, I don't know their name, and they've been here since we've been here.
Yeah.
And I felt really bad about that, because I could have gone over there and just said hello, and I've waved to them when walking the dog, but I didn't take that extra step to be the good neighbor.
Interesting. When you guys moved in, did people do that for you?
Some, but then we were the ones that, as people came into the neighborhood, we would then go and introduce ourselves. That's how we met Tony. So literally, Tony lives right behind us.
Yeah.
And so when they moved in, his son Dylan and my son Deuce, they're the same age. They were out playing, but Tammy, my wife, made cookies, walked over there, rang the doorbell. Or actually, she didn't make cookies. I think she gave him a gift card because she was busy. And she's like, normally I like to make cookies, but here's something. But that was just that moment that started that connection. The people that moved out don't have kids, or at least kids that were our age. And so you could see it. And then once we stopped doing the outreach, you don't see a lot of neighborhood involvement. Like my wife and I, we love to involve everybody. And so we would have big blow up parties in the square. We would have get togethers. We had cookouts in the driveway every New Year's Eve. And then when we stopped, because we got busy, it just stopped. Like, the neighborhood's a ghost town. But that's also the next generation of kids that just want to stay inside and stay on their iPads.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Sort of a similar situation with us. We lived in Charleston, South Carolina for maybe like 18 years. And it was a great place to live. I loved it. There wasn't a ton of interaction with neighbors. There were some things. Actually, one of our neighbors was fantastic. She came over one day and asked if we wanted some crabs. And then I followed her across the street, and she had a couple of bushels of crabs that she and I think her sister had gone out and caught. And they were just running around in the trunk of her car because the bushel had poured over. So we got those. Anyway, that's a totally different story. But when we moved to where we are now up in Northeast Georgia, within the first week or week and a half, we had, 8 or 9 different neighbors that stopped by with food, plants. It was like going back in time to what I heard about, at least people growing up in the 50s dealt with, where people are leaving their doors unlocked and just very neighborly. Another time I was moving this giant commercial treadmill into our home gym, and a guy that lives down the street just happened to be driving by and saw me about to throw my back out doing it myself, and just stopped and helped me. We'd never talked before. He's not a very social person in any way, shape, or form, but I'll never forget that he did that. That colors everything that I think about him from now until forever. And interactions like that are so important. And I know that Tucker Carlson has talked a number of times about just all this onslaught of horrible information about all the crap going on in the world, and the way people are treating each other, and government corruption and war and all this. And people just, rightfully so, feel so overwhelmed by it. Like, what am I supposed to do? And his answer almost every time is just go out and love your neighbor. Take care of the people that are in your own community. That's what you can affect. And recognizing that and kind of pushing out this idea that it's up to us to us individually to somehow prop up the entire world on our own or come up with some great solution. Like, that'd be nice, but what can you actually do? And what can you do right now with no more money, no more resources than what you have right now in this moment? Just start. Just go out and be nice to people.
It's the second commandment. We're supposed to be the good neighbor. And I've had conversations with people is that we expect the other person to be the neighbor to us, and then I'll be a good neighbor. But we're supposed to do the outreach. We're supposed to say something. And like you said at the very beginning, is something simple. Like that guy pulling over. Now you will be a character witness and like, look, I don't know anything about the guy, but he stopped and helped me. And that was awesome. And we just don't do that enough. And I'm calling myself out because I don't do it enough either. And I have a tendency as a self-professed introvert, I'd much rather everybody else do their thing all the time and let me just stay in my corner. But that's not healthy. That's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for them or the world, because we need to have those touch points with people to where they see us as humans.
How do you square that? If you say that you're an introvert, with being the guy that throws the block parties that has everybody over, like, how does that work?
So I like to get everybody involved, and then I stand at the grill.
Okay.
So I like to invite and get everybody together, and then I like to retreat and get in the corner, and I like to see everything unfold. So I love to get things organized, get people together, but then I don't want to be the center of attention.
Okay.
And so, like, for me is I would always cook, or like we had a China box. And so for New Year's Eve, I would cook a hog. And so it's easy in one of those China boxes because you just put it in there in 6 hours, you have a whole hog that's cooked. But I would just sit there next to it, acting like I had to tend to it and kind of move the charcoal around a little bit when I didn't. But it was just, to me, that was fun. And it was fun to see everybody else chit chat and have conversations. And I like having conversations like this because I'm not a fan of idle chit chat. Like, I'd rather have a conversation that's meaningful versus, so where do you work? How's the weather? Because those are all the questions that I ask, because then I kind of run out of stuff to talk about. But I like people who like having a conversation.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't. And so I just find it hard to find people that are willing to have like real conversations and not complain about the neighbor or complain about what's happening at sports and the politics and all this. And I'm fine to have everybody has an opinion about those. I just don't want to talk about those all the time. Like, I want to know Charlie. I want to know like what you do, what you enjoy to do. What was your last trip that you had fun on? And some people just don't like chit chatting like that. So I wait for people to come to me, which is not good. But I've been in sales my whole life, so I can do it, but I would prefer not to. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there are a number of people who host podcasts who describe themselves as being introverts and, I'm not the best conversationalist. And it's like, well, then why'd you choose to do that? But I get it. It makes sense. And the part about you liking to be over by the grill and cooking is I love to host. I've always enjoyed that. Same thing. I like getting people together, but I really do appreciate having a task, something that I can be occupied with in case stuff starts to get stale and you start to feel like kind of weird or awkward. But I'm also, I don't know if I would describe myself as, I guess I am a conversationalist. I can talk to anybody. So again, I'm a huge contradiction and I'm very conflicted, Jeff. We'll see where this goes.
You're torn. You're non-binary is what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
But it's important for people, and I like the idea that you're a complex person, because it leads to really good conversations. And I've had people and I've been in environments where I've had conversations like this, and you can see, and usually it's dudes, they zone out. They're like, I'm out. I do not want to have this kind of conversation. And then they roll their eyes and off they go, which is fine. I just need more. Like, I need more, and I have no problem talking. I also, if I'm around a lot of people who do a lot of talking, I won't say anything. There's no need for me to try to interrupt or interject. So usually I'm quiet because nobody else will be quiet.
Interesting. All right. Well, and here we are. We're having a conversation.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to get all these questions, but I love it.
Jeff. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm picking myself up by the bootstraps. One of the things that I wanted to talk about that really came to my mind is, and I've listened to your other podcast, is around just life pivots. You said earlier you were in law enforcement for a long time, and now you're the managing editor of a magazine. Mm-hmm. And so when you hear of those two things, that seems contradictory, like we were saying, complex as well. So a lot of people now are in these positions in life where pivots are necessary. So walk the audience through, give us a little bit of your backstory. You don't have to go super involved. There's other podcasts that you've done that on. But I really want to talk about that point in the middle where pivot started and probably imposter syndrome and I'm not qualified, how you manage all those things.
Sure. I was in law enforcement. I was a police detective. My specialty is human trafficking. I've been qualified as an expert in court, which means I can go and give an opinion, whereas most people, when they testify to the facts of the things that they experienced in a specific case. I can be brought in from the outside, having no involvement in that case, and offer an opinion to the court, to the jury on how I see it based on all of my years of experience and the things that I've done. So I was rocking and rolling in that job, loved it, really enjoyed a lot of the aspects of homicide investigations was another thing I specialized in, and that's fascinating. But I got to a point where I realized that anything that I'm remotely interested in, if I'm going to be paid for it, if it's my job, I'm really going to be invested in it. And I'm going to work my butt off. And if you're working for a municipal police department or even a federal law enforcement agency, there's a distinct cap as to what you can bring home for your family. And where I was working, and this is not just specific to that department, but in law enforcement in general, you can bust your butt all day long. And as a detective doing all these, I started the first human trafficking unit in the state of South Carolina and was getting all sorts of good press for our department in a time where there was a lot of bad press about police. But my salary was the exact same as some dude that just sat in his cruiser under a tree all day. Right? There's no incentive there. And I wanted to get out into the private sector in a way that would be more beneficial for my family. That was something I was really interested in. And through sort of happenstance, I didn't get into hunting until I was 39. Absolutely fell in love with it the first time I ever did it. And my wife, I think, is the one that found the Field Ethos Instagram. And it was back when it was just an Instagram handle and a website. There was no publication yet. And I saw that they accepted stories from just random dudes. And so I wrote up my first 2 pig hunts, sent it in, and in it I referenced using a police issued flashlight to shine for pigs. And Jason, who started the company as former law enforcement from South Carolina, picked up on that, reached out to me, and we started talking. And both of us were into surfing and punk rock and just had very similar senses of humor and got along really well. And I never thought that I was going to get out of law enforcement. I was actually in the process of trying to convince the U.S. Attorney's Office to create an investigative position within their office for me to come in and do investigations for them. But, obviously God had other plans. And so I ended up talking to Field Ethos and then get an offer to come work with them, and it required a move. And so I did. Moved my entire family to a different state, got completely out of a place where I was very comfortable. I was giving training all around the state to everybody from doctors to lawyers to other law enforcement. Judges across the entire state came to me for training on human trafficking investigations. And so I was very, very comfortable in that role as a man, as a provider. It was great. I was considered an expert. And then I jump into this thing with Field Ethos, and my initial title was Swiss Army knife. And so I was doing all kinds of stuff, right? I was doing customer service. I was helping with coming up with the different ideas for products and doing some of the back end stuff for the website and helping with just anything and everything that needed to be done. And so then eventually I started taking on some of the other duties for managing the website and getting those stories up and edited and doing the same for the magazine. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's total imposter syndrome for a while because I have no background at all whatsoever in writing. Now I've written a ton and was a pretty prolific report writer for my previous job, but that was all really dry, very factual, whatever. And it's funny because in this role, you meet a bunch of people that are really into writing and they're really into outdoor writing, and they spent their whole life, looking up to these different outdoor writers and wanted to be a part of that scene. And they come up expecting some great story from me about how I came up in the business. And it's like, oh, actually, no, not really. And so that felt like an imposter on top of feeling like I wasn't qualified, in my own mind for doing this stuff. But, But it was one of those things where, in looking at all the circumstances that happened leading up to it, there was no explanation other than the grace of God for why I had all these different opportunities. I mean, from the way that I got into hunting to how it affected me, to the story going in, to Jason reaching out, to, things kind of really taking a turn in the criminal justice system in America, and me seeing some of the stuff behind the curtain that really bothered me. And, I was with one department for 11 and a half years, and then they came out with a vaccine mandate and said, you absolutely have to take this. And I filed a religious exemption that was denied. And, I applied to, I think it was something crazy. I don't know, 12, 18 different jobs, all in the private sector. And some of the stuff that I was insanely qualified for, and felt really good about it. I got one callback, and that was it. And so, in looking, we don't have to go all the way down the road to the vaccine mandate thing, but a little bit of that was, when you become a law enforcement officer, they tell you, rightfully so, and they being your administrators, that the one thing that you have to mind and protect as a law enforcement officer is a person's freedom, their ability to choose. And there's another way of explaining this, and that escapes me right now, and it sounded way better than where I'm going with this. But this idea that we're out there and we have the ability to take away somebody's freedom. That was something that never, ever lost its impact on me. And I can remember being out on patrol my first couple of nights by myself when I had all this authority, and there were situations where it was like, all right, now it's time to place this person under arrest. It's like, holy crap. Like, they're not going home, they're going to jail. And I'm the one that's starting this process. Like, I better be damn sure that I'm right about all of this. And, to have the people, the administrators that came to us and emphasized the importance of protecting people's freedoms and their ability to kind of do what our Constitution allows us to do, to have those same people turn around and look at all their officers and say, oh, but you guys don't get that choice, right? Like, you have to do this or you lose your job. And it's like, now I can understand having to take vaccines or whatever as a prerequisite for being hired. But after you've been hired, that shouldn't be the case. And I felt strongly enough about it to leave that job without having another one lined up. I applied to all these different jobs and none of it really shook out. But, so I was ready to go. And it was important to me that my kids see that their dad, his beliefs are his beliefs, regardless of whether it's convenient or not. And so I ended up, getting a phone call from a different department that offered me a job kind of in the last hour there. And I went and did that for 6 months before this position at Field Ethos was ready. But it's wild, man. It's as a husband, a man, a provider, to go into the complete unknown, to move, to take your family away from all their friends and everything that's comfortable to them, and to put your faith in God and say, okay, I'm trusting you to take care of me, and we'll figure this thing out. It was a lot, but so beneficial. And there have been so many different things like that in my life where I've had opportunities to go and do something. And some of them are ridiculously fun, and some are not so fun. But the idea that you should be open to taking all these different opportunities as they come up, I can't overstress that. Like, obviously you don't want to overcommit yourself, but if there's something that even remotely interests you and you get the opportunity to do it, don't turn it down. The worst thing happens is you fail. Okay. Well, you learn something, and then you go on and do the next thing with the knowledge that you picked up from failing at whatever it was. But yeah, I don't know if that really gets to the heart of your question, but there we go.
Yeah, no, it creates a great picture, because there's so many times in life where, one, either you're forced to make a change or you decide to make a change. And they're similar. Sometimes, like for me, is I had to be forced to make a change. I was in a job that I didn't like, and thank goodness I got laid off, because I never would have quit. But I'm so glad that changed. Has it been easy since? Heck no. Has it been worth it? Oh yeah, for sure. And I just want to remind people, as they're going through changes in life, that it's okay, especially if you get that little, I'm a little scared. It's that Peter stepping out in faith moment in the boat. I guarantee you he was scared, but he had his eyes on Jesus and said, okay, I know that I'm going to be okay because he told me I'm going to be okay. And it was
Right.
when he took his eyes off of Jesus is when he started to sink. And guess what? Who helped him? And that's the whole process of faith. And so through all that, where was like, I have a feeling I know the answer, but how was your wife, her support in all of these decisions that you had to make? Where was that?
She was all on board with me getting out of law enforcement when it happened for, issues with the vaccine. All that was a minor part of it. The bigger part of it was it's such a disruption to family life. We were on call as detectives every fourth week, 24 hours a day for the whole week. I got called out all the time. We'd have to drive separately to all these different places if I was on call because I get called in at a moment's notice. No idea when I was going to be back. And she's very type A, loves to plan stuff out. And that doesn't sit well. And, the attitude shifting towards law enforcement during the time that I was there, safety issues, terrible, terrible administrative decisions from the federal level all the way down to the local level. And so she was definitely ready for that. The idea of leaving and moving to a different state, I don't know that, obviously she was hesitant. She had a fantastic job where we were, but again, the way that God worked out a new job for her here, I mean, it wasn't listed all of a sudden, it was listed. And then without her even knowing it, one of the guys that she was, the principal at the school where she was teaching, called somebody at the school up here and without her even knowing it, and recommended her for the job. And just all those things fell into place. And then, we came and visited a couple of times just so they could get the lay of the land and feel it out. And fortunately, all of them loved it. My kids were a little hesitant, obviously, because they were leaving their entire friend group. But within a few months of being here, they were super on board and have been ever since. But yeah, I was really lucky in the sense that my wife was very supportive pretty much the whole way through. I mean, she was ready for that change of some sort.
Yeah. And it's really important, back to what you had said, is what you surround yourself with and where your priorities lie, and seeing that it's God, family, and then everything else will come in later means that you make good decisions. I've never made a decision when God or my family has been at the forefront that I've ever regretted.
Sure.
Ever.
Yeah.
And that's just a lesson that I want the audience to hear, is weigh things out and say, okay, am I making a selfish decision, meaning that maybe it was a field ethos position that paid you quadruple but everything else just looked wrong, and you had resistance at home. You didn't really feel peace, but you saw this big number and then you justified it and then you went towards it. You could justify certain things, but ultimately that probably would have been made because of the salary versus
Sure.
all of the other things that are involved. So the other thing when people are taking pivots is the importance of transferable skills. I'm a big believer in that. So where, again, not ever being a manager of a managing editor of a magazine before, what were some of those transferable skills that you started to find that would work from your previous career in the now new career?
Sure. I don't know that there are that many that are directly correlated. I think that just my general background, again, back to my dad encouraging me to go out and explore anything and everything that was of interest to me. Well, that means I've got a ton of interests, right? So I'm interested in all kind of stuff. And my grandfather was a radio show host. He hosted a morning radio show for 40, 50 plus years. And then my dad ended up joining him on that for a number of years. And I say all that to say that I come from like a family of storytellers, right? Like they're just, to listen to my grandfather, to listen to my dad, they've got hilarious, amazing, wonderful stories. And so I've got that in my background, right? I'm already interested in talking to other people and getting any and every story I can find that might be of interest and then retelling that. So there's some crossover. I've been interested in photography for my whole life. I've never been awesome at any of the technical stuff. You flip it over to, take it off of auto and you'll see some panic set in on my face, and maybe I can figure it out. Maybe I can't. Judge me how you will. But, I've focused a lot more on composition and tones and, all of that stuff rather than the actual mechanics of the camera come at me. But so I think there was naturally an interest there. I love to travel. Um, Obviously I've developed a desire for hunting, but when you're a cop, you end up talking to people from all walks of life, and you have to very quickly establish a rapport with somebody if it's going to be a productive interaction. And going back to something I mentioned at the very beginning, where I've had this ability to talk to people and they kind of open up to me, like, I don't know if it's just a natural warmth that people feel from me, but I can tell you from my side looking out, like, I'm genuinely interested in other people. I love talking to people and hearing what they have to say and hearing about the things that are on their mind, whether it's something thought provoking or whether it's a struggle that they're having or whatever. And in doing this job, I got to go out and find things that other people are going to be interested in, and then make sure that I'm getting people to write those stories in a way that that interest comes across and our readers are enjoying it. And so, in a lot of ways, it's sort of this great, like, it's sort of all the puzzle pieces kind of coming together from everything else that I've done in my life. And now I'm able to find an outlet here, and a pretty creative one too, which is fantastic. So yeah, I think it's just sort of all sort of comes together. It's not necessarily that being a police detective makes you uniquely qualified to be a managing editor for a magazine. Absolutely not. If I had applied directly for this position from being a detective and hadn't had any of that interaction beforehand, never would have looked at my resume at all. Right? It'd be straight to the trash. But I think there are a lot of things that I'm able to draw on, not necessarily from being a detective, but just from being interested in other people and interested in everything that's going on around me.
See, and I think that's a perfect transferable skill. And I just want the audience to hear what you had to say. Is if you go back 10, 15 seconds, is what Charlie was sharing is that the whole person. So you bring you to any situation. So I feel like that whatever you bring into that moment is a transferable skill. And we always looked, when I would hire people in sales, I looked for those transferable skills, meaning that I'm not just going to lock in on someone who has sales experience. I've hired school teachers because they're able to break down complex conversations into simple, digestible moments. So you just have to look at the person and not necessarily the resume. And I'm so happy that, and that's where it's God's timing, is that he brought you in when you had to do all these other things. So then when that managing editor position became available, it was a natural shoe in. One, because you understood everything that was involved, the voice of Field Ethos, kind of who Jason is, what the vision of everything is. Where, like you said, is if you just came in and got plugged into one spot, it would have been really difficult. You would have done it because your creativity, your ability to connect. But like you said, is you may not have even been considered for the position. And that's the other thing, for people to put your hat in your hand sometimes and maybe start at a different position because you don't know what God's preparing for you on the other side.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, I have always been the type of person that, go back to when I was a detective. When I had a case that was getting progressing along towards a trial, I would get in touch with the prosecutor and go over ask a ton of questions about stuff that I have no control over. I don't have a say. I'm not playing a part, but I wanted to know how all these different pieces fit together to build the full picture. And you can't put a value on what you just talked about somebody who sees a company or some kind of industry that resonates with them, and they decide to get a job there doing anything that's available. And by doing that, you start to learn how all these different pieces work together. And then you become extremely valuable to that company because you get the whole thing. You understand the entire picture. And there's a guy that actually has been on a couple of our safaris with us who did the same thing. I mean, he's had every position you could possibly imagine within his company. And now he's set. I mean, they'd be a fool to get rid of him because he understands everything. If there's a problem in an area 15 times removed from him, well, guess what? He was there at one point, and he'd be a great resource for understanding how to fix that problem. So yeah, absolutely. If there's something that interests you, dive in wherever you can get in and work your way through, up, over, however, and maybe it's not
Exactly.
within that company. Maybe it's, you jump to an adjacent company, but you're still getting that experience.
One of the things you talked about, and this will be the final thing that I really want to discuss, is hearing and feeling God moving you into a different place. And that's where some people, I know I've struggled at times of going, okay, is this really where God wants me to go? And how do I know? Have I heard the audible voice of God? I wish I would have burning bush moments in my life to where I knew, all right, I'm told to go this way now, because
Yeah,
that's
dude,
where
don't we
the
all?
clear sign was. So what did that look like? Or what is that, not that particular situation, because I know it's ongoing. Um, Help people see where, like, how you utilize, um, or how you view where God's leading you in certain aspects of your life.
One of the greatest things that I ever started to pray and ask for was not for opportunities and not for a burning bush moment so much, and not for, show me where to go, show me this, show me that. It was close doors for me, firmly closed doors. And I think there's a measure of heartbreak that most people associate with that, which is why we don't ask for it more often than not, because there are things we really want. Like, oh, don't close that door. Let me at least think that that's still a possibility. But man, that was absolutely fantastic. And like I mentioned earlier, I never thought that I was going to get out of law enforcement. I thought I was just kind of move into maybe a different aspect of it. Loved it so much. I was good at it. I was respected in that field. Nobody, certainly nobody gives a crap about what I thought as a managing editor when I first came over here, because I had no experience at all doing it. But um, I started praying for closed doors, and little by little, I started releasing the grasp on, I'm never going to get out of law enforcement. And I'm never going to leave Charleston. And it was just it was a change of heart that God put in me. Like, that's all I can explain it as, is a lot of the things that I firmly held on to that I thought were permanent truths started to kind of come loose, and doors started to close. And it was very apparent in my job quest when I applied to like 18 different positions, and none of them had no interest at all whatsoever. Those were some pretty firmly closed doors. And that stung a little bit, because I'm telling you, man, like some of those I was like, dude, there's no way I'm not going to get this job. This is perfect. And that door just slammed. And it's like, that's what you asked for. And that's a pretty clear answer. So, time to express some gratitude to God for answering that prayer in the way that you asked for it to be answered. But yeah, it was a slow, gradual thing, and until it wasn't, right. And so, like, having 18 different positions not call you back at all, other than one briefly, those are some pretty firmly closed doors. So that was kind of a fast paced moment in that progression. But other than that, I think it was kind of a slow, gradual thing where I'd start having a different idea that was maybe a little bit further removed from actually having law enforcement certification and a badge and arrest powers. And it's like, oh, I could fill this position here. And it's like, whoa, I never thought I'd consider even moving this far. And then after that, I'm considering and looking out here and further and further, until it was like, yeah, man, let's do this. Let's go.
Yeah. And he moves you at the pace until you're ready.
Sure.
And that's what I really liked about what you were sharing, is it wasn't just all of a sudden he slammed every door at once. He started closing the right doors to move you down the right hallway to lead you down the path that he needed you to go on. And when you were talking, the first thing that came to my mind is, I don't trust me to make the right decision.
No,
'Cause
absolutely not.
I've made so many bad ones. And when you were saying closing the doors, that just, to me, it takes a lot of pressure off of me, of
Yeah,
saying, is that close the doors. And I like also what you said about change my heart. That's a scary one as well. It's like
sure.
David, he was like, look at my heart, reveal my heart. And you're like, oh, I don't know. I definitely don't want to pray that. And the changing of my heart is just, I want to follow you more. And then you have to, like you said, you have to be prepared for the answer. You say, change my heart. He's going to change it, but it's not going to be easy.
No, it's not. And one other thing that I'd like to mention is to go from a position, what was cool in a way about human trafficking investigations. Like, if you're a narc detective, right? And so you're going out and busting drug dealers and people that have dope on them, whatever. There are going to be some people who are like, oh, that should be legal anyway. You're an idiot. You're wasting your time. I can't believe you. I hate you guys, whatever. Right. But like nobody on any side of any aisle is going to be like, yeah, you really should stop rescuing people from slavery. Right. So that was a very easy position to have in that regard. And then when you look at the work and the people that you're interacting with and the pieces of crap that you're putting away, and then the victims that you're getting to help, like, dude, that's a pretty worthy cause, and you feel good about it. And to go from that to like, well, now I'm editing a magazine, like, oh, did I screw up? Is this really what God wanted me to do? Like, am I really affecting change in the same way that I used to? And that was a hard thing to deal with. But then I realized, like, man, I'm in a position where I'm going out on these trips with all these different people, interacting with all these different people, even from here at my desk, I'm on the phone with different writers and stuff. And the opportunity that I've got to share my faith with those people is incredible. And it's an opportunity I never would have had. I never would have interacted with those people had I not gotten into this position. And so I had to shift my focus on how I'm, supposed to be doing good in the world from something that was pretty concrete and fighting human trafficking to looking for the right opportunities to go and share my faith with the people that I'm interacting with in the space that I'm in now. And it's been really cool. It's been really neat. And I don't want to sit up here. I've talked a lot about faith and a lot about God. Like, I am not some fantastic example of what a Christian should be. I've got plenty of flaws just like anybody else. But it matters. It matters how we treat each other and it matters what our priorities are. And I try really hard to stay in line with that. Definitely fail multiple times every day. But I don't want this to be a podcast where I come off as this like holy roller that's got it all together. Cause I certainly don't. But if that's ever a conversation that somebody that runs across my path wants to have, then I'll have it. And I'll tell you honestly how difficult it is, but how rewarding it is at the same time.
Yeah. And there's a lot in that. Is that you're the proper example of a Christian, that none of us are perfect. None of us have it figured out. Golf shirt, khaki pants, we're perfect, no issues. Because how many of those have been revealed when you pull the curtain back? They're the worst of the worst. And
golfers,
the fact, yeah, exactly. Don't even get me started there.
Fly fisherman.
But yeah. And it's just so important to know that we're all flawed individuals. We're just forgiven. And that's the whole thing and like you said, is treating people right and with grace. The other part that and I know that this, is that you're also where you got out of the law enforcement because your first focus is your wife and your kids. And you needed to be everything that Charlie needed to be to show up for them, because as men, that's our first most important mission field. And it goes back to what you said, what greatness is that you want them to be believers. You want to be able to show up, show them exactly how they're supposed to live and why Jesus is important. And probably based on what you'd said is in law enforcement, you would have been spread so thin, so stressed, you may not have been able to show up the way God needed you to show up for them. And that's another key reason of pivot. That's why I'm not in corporate, because I could not balance a lot of that and not chasing the titles, chasing the money, chasing, and like just being 100% involved with that. And now I'm okay being 100% a husband and a father first, because those are the most two important roles. Because when I'm on my deathbed, I want that to be what they saw, not, oh, dad was VP of this and had all this. And you can have all that. I mean, trust me, I'd love to make more money and have all those things, but not at the sacrifice of this over here. And I was before. I sacrificed family, Jesus, everything for work. And it just wasn't where I needed to be. And so now I'm focused. So
when you were doing that, when you were sacrificing everything for work, did you do it under the guise of, this is what I have to do to provide for my family? Or was there something else?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And And probably a lot of it was I was looking to fill the poor self-esteem I had for myself, is that if I continue to elevate my position hierarchy in corporate America, then I'm going to be somebody.
Right.
And when you're like, no, I'm just another dude with a different title, with a bigger pay grade. And so it was all ego driven. And then my dad, he passed away when I was a senior in high school, and he was a small business owner and pretty much worked himself to death. And he gave me the visibility of what not to do. And he loved me. And the reason why I say the visibility of what not to do is that, when he died, he wished he would have done more with my brother and I, but he was providing, he was doing what he saw what men were supposed to do, is stay somewhat emotionally distant, bring home the paycheck, make sure everybody's got food and clothes, and that's it. That's your role. And I always said, well, I'm never going to do that. But then I found myself, yes, I was at soccer practice when they were little, but I was on my phone answering emails.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there. I was doing the exact same thing in my mind. I was good at my job. I was great at my job because that's all I thought about. I was constantly thinking about that. And over time, I had those doors closing because I realized I wasn't capable of doing that. And when I was laid off, my wife didn't work. And so when I decided to not go back into corporate America, I would not have done it without her. I was like, okay, I want to try this, being a consultant and coaching people and helping people and doing this and that, and which none of it ever worked, but it got me to where I'm at today. But it was her saying, let's do this. Let's go. And neither one of us having a job. What happens next? But I'm a much better husband and father than I ever was if I would have stayed in corporate America.
So in a practical sense, because I think this is a really important point for people to realize, because I can tell you as an outsider, hearing that story that you just told about how you were able to make that happen, there are people that would look at that and go, well, yeah, but you obviously had some really nice nest egg built up that you could draw from that allowed you to make that transition into being a more present father and a more present husband. Is that true? Did you have something that you could draw from? Or how did you make that work, practically speaking?
Yeah, great question. So yes, I was a good steward in my 22 years in my corporate career, just a really good steward. Now, were we rolling in it? Can we do all that? No, but we could make it through. And so I would always pray, God, please provide, meaning that I wanted clients, I wanted somebody to pay me. And then he revealed to me, I was out walking the dog, and I can see it plain as day. He's like, I've been helping you for the last 22 years. So now it's a matter of living off of what we anticipated in my 60s. And so, I mean, there is a finite number that we're going to run out of runway, but with looking back, every dollar that we've spent from that has been extremely valuable to spend time with my kids. I do understand that a lot of people aren't in that position, but then we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, well, what decisions am I making that I need to make differently? So like now is, we're not driving Bugattis and doing all this stuff. It's the money that we spend. It's all on family and the kids, and investing in them, getting them ready for school, getting them ready for life. And so we make certain sacrifices because we understand it's only money. Like I could literally walk out the door and get hit by a tree, a tree falls and kills me. And then what good is it to have all this money? And so seeing people, and you hear Dave Ramsey and other people.
Welcome to Pathways to Greatness, the show where faith meets focus and potential.
You have all these people
purpose.
that
I'm your host, Jeff Forrester, mental performance coach, speaker,
ideas
and believer that greatness
what do I need to
begins
do?
within.
How do I need to do
Each
it?
episode, we'll
And then
uncover
from
the
that,
biblical principles,
trying to make a
mindset
decision
strategies, and daily
of
disciplines that help student athletes,
How
parents,
can I make
and
a
leaders
decision
just
like Jeff
you
made,
walk
or make
boldly
a
in their
decision like
calling.
Charlie made?
Let's
And
step
some of
onto
it
the
is
path
just
that leads to
start
true
preparing
greatness,
now. And
God's
it's
way.
small changes, small sacrifices that over the course of time do add up to allow you to make bigger decisions that you need to. I don't know if that helped.
No, it does, because, like I said, I've always been pretty good at being able to see multiple sides of an issue. And I just think that there are people that will very quickly hear your story and be like, oh, well, he had money saved up. I don't have, hardly anything in the bank. I can't do that yet. But one of the things that you said that I think people really need to pay attention to, regardless of how much money that they have in the bank, is they need to look in the mirror and look at the decisions that they're making. And how are those decisions benefiting their long-term goals? And also, something else I touched on was just the desire to be open to opportunities, the willingness to be open to opportunities. And so if you combine those, if you start asking yourself the questions of, is this where I want to be? If my priorities are my family, and right now I'm not prioritizing them because I'm prioritizing my job, even if it's one that doesn't pay that well and I don't have a bunch of money in the bank, what decisions do I need to be making differently to position myself to where when an opportunity comes up, I can take it? And I think that's a very important action step for people to be able to make the transition into the realm that you and I are talking about. And again, it's where I want to be. It's not some place that I'm claiming that I am, but it is what I'm striving for, is to prioritize my family in that way.
Yeah. And it just takes one moment. And I know plenty of people that were living paycheck to paycheck that still prioritize their family. So
Sure.
If you're not in a position to be able to do what you would like to do, still doesn't mean you can't prioritize that. Because I know plenty of people who work a whole hard job 9 to 9 each day, but when they're home, they're home. And so that would be the message that I would want to give anybody who wants to work, which is fine. I love being busy. I love doing something, but make sure that when you're home, you're home. When you're with your spouse, you're with your spouse. When you're with your kids, you're with your kids. The emails can wait. Nobody's going to die if I don't answer an email about somebody wanting to book a hunt. But there's that weird thing in my head is that it comes in, I feel like I've got to act on this now to do it. So it's self-regulation, is that you don't have to go to any extremes to make your spouse and your kids number one. And you definitely don't have to go to any extremes other than being a follower to put God number one.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, Charlie, sorry, I don't know what happened to my camera, but anyways, I can still see you and nobody wants to see my face anyways, but I've kept you a long time. But what would be some parting remarks you'd like to leave the audience with today?
I don't know, man. When we first started talking about doing this, and I asked you, I said, okay, well, what's the topic that you want to cover? And, talked about greatness and this, looking at some of the other stuff you've put out, the idea of leadership. And so my immediate thought was like, cool, I'm going to go and learn some stuff about that, because I don't necessarily see myself as somebody that's mastered greatness or leadership at all. But this has been a really enjoyable conversation. I think that there's a lot for people to be able to take away from just the idea of asking themselves some of the questions that you asked me, right? So what is greatness? And what are some of the things that you can do right now in order to start moving towards that? And you don't have to have a ton of money. You don't have to have a job that you love. You don't even have to have a family at this point if you're younger and still striving for all that. But go ahead and figure out what your definition of greatness is and start taking steps today, however small, towards reaching that goal.
Awesome. Well said. How can people find and follow you?
I am on Instagram at the Charlie Benton. It's _Charlie_Benton.
Perfect. And then you can also find some of his stuff at Field Ethos as well.
Yeah, fieldethos.com. And you should go and subscribe to our magazine. It's the best print journal ever made, ever.
And definitely follow his Instagram to see his pictures. One of these days, he will follow my recommendation of making a coffee table book, because he takes amazing pictures and they're fantastic.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, hang tight a little bit, Charlie, but Thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed getting to know you better. Thank you for the questions back. A lot of times I don't get questioned back, and I don't mind answering. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Benton.